Well, Melissa, I'm so glad to get to host this conversation today as we talk through kind of what does creating culture in your startup and the company that you're founding, and that doesn't have to wait till you actually have lots of people. So a little spoiler there, but yeah, I'm excited to share your expertise with the community. So will you go ahead and just introduce yourself and kind of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, right on. Well, I'm Melissa, and I founded my company, ThriveOps Labs, which is a company of one. And my mission is really to help people, teams, and companies thrive. So my background and experience has spanned mostly in biotech and tech over the last 12, 13 years. So I started my career in HR, talent, and culture in a small company called Genealogics here in Canada. And we started as a company of 25 when I was there and grew to about 60 people. And then we were acquired by a Fortune 500 company down in the States called Illumina. And that was kind of the ultimate opportunity in terms of our acquisition portfolio. Like that was the number one pick, which was really exciting. And so I worked at Illumina for 2 years. And in that time, they grew from being a company of about 4,200 to a company of 8,000. So I saw a lot of growth there as well. From there, I went to another small startup and we grew that team from 25 to 50. And then we merged with another Canadian company of about 40 people. So that's kind of my M&A experience. I was the project lead for both of those and obviously managed all the culture changes that we stumbled through along the way. And then in the last few years, I've predominantly just been working with founders, really on the one-to-one basis and with their small teams. So mostly people under 5 employees or maybe 6 or 7. I really like this size, I think, because there is so much impact to be had when you're just working with a founder. It can have a massive impact on the product, the team, and all the things. So that's kind of where my focus has been in the last while.
Awesome. Well, I love that. Yeah, I love the different types of experience that you're bringing in to this conversation, but also that it's you've been in those shoes, you've been walking with people in those shoes as founders, and so I'm excited to dive in. So let's jump into the framework and kind of look at what is culture, what does creating culture look like in each of these stages. All right, well, let's step into our next stage from adoption. So like we said before, adoption is our transitional stage of getting to that ideal month. And then once we're at that ideal month, sustainability is trying to make that ideal month every month. And it doesn't mean that everything's flat. This is actually sustainable growth that we're getting to here. But in this time frame, now we're probably bringing on actually a lot more people. There's some more specialization going on probably because we're really trying to, we've delivered and now we're trying to make that delivery normal. And so there's more processes and like, how do we make that kind of automatic? But we're also going, okay, can we, if our revenue's here, can we actually lower those expenses and make that profit margin a little bigger? So there's some optimizing going on in there. From a culture standpoint, again, you're not putting on the brakes, but it is a different, where in adoption, you're just like, all right, let's go. We're trying to get way up here. There is kind of a felt shift there a little bit when you come into sustainability. How does that impact culture, and what should a founder be thinking about as they kind of enter that and navigate that stage?
Yeah, great. I think it's like almost like a breather moment,
Yeah.
right? And so to really like use that breather to put some more systems in place and communication tools in place at that time, right? So you're going to have more people on board. And there's another tool called the RACI diagram, roles, accountability, consulted or informed. And it's like, which of those 4 things does this task need? So this is really helpful, I think, for founders because up until now, you've probably been involved in all the decision making, and you need to step back. Otherwise, you will not get to the subsequent stages, right? And so you need to be able to empower your team to make those decisions. And you have to be really clear, like, when do you want to be informed versus when do you need to be consulted on a decision? if somebody, because you're growing at this stage, you've had people on from the very get-go that have probably been involved in every single decision, you need to relinquish that from them. And so setting these you could say they're kind of like boundaries in terms of, but it's like a mode of operation and communication and how you get things done. And this is helpful to set up now, because as you go into subsequent steps, you need to move quicker. And if you don't put this in place, you have a tendency to have to consult too many people to get something done, and it really slows you down. So this is a really good opportunity to assess your team and kind of who's doing what.
No, that's good. Yeah, so it sounds like the in that, as you're describing, using the RACI framework, but that decision making you're trying to push down to a level that's actually just closer to the customer, but also just allowing some of those other levels to be able to, especially in these future stages, to look more forward and towards growth and opportunities. One thing that shifts too here is, I feel like, sometimes people who love building and creating don't love managing, and don't, they appreciate systems, but they may not be the best system designers or system keepers, even potentially. How does that, because again, like you said earlier, we were talking about some of those early stages, the company does take on a reflection of the founder, but then even as you have those early employees that are probably more in the let's build something new, let's create something new, it takes on a shared personality of that early team. Well, now you're moving into something that you don't want to go stagnant, but you do need to focus more on, like you said, systems, communication tools, process. How do you not lose that entrepreneurial culture, but also not make people do things they hate? And how do you navigate that tension there?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think that where you want to see tools and systems come in are for things that employees are having problems with,
Okay.
right? So if, for example, a PTO tracking tool, right? Okay, so as an employee, I have to go and ask the accountant, how many PTO days, why can't I just go to a spreadsheet? Well, what that's actually telling me as an employee is that maybe you don't care about my PTO. Maybe I shouldn't even get to take PTO. And so it's when you hear things like that, that's when you put in some sort of operational system, and that's, you have to give the ownership to somebody of that. Better yet is when you find little issues or stumbling blocks within the team or within your organization. You have to start empowering people to figure out the solution and implement it. This is where you don't want that culture of, hey, this is wrong, somebody fix it. You want the culture to be, hey, this is wrong, I have an idea of how we fix it.
Yeah, well, I love that. Yeah, you're inviting the people who are proximate to the systems to be maybe the inventors, or at least the shapers of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is when if somebody's like, hey, I think I looked into this tool, it's going to be $20 a month, and this is what, be open to it, right? And then the other thing you mentioned about the people who are now managing people who don't want to be managing people per se. I also see a lot is people who want to be managing people who shouldn't be managing people. They just don't have the skill set yet. So this is also, in terms of looking at your talent, this is a really good time to do a talent and capability assessment. So just listing out all the talent, what you need to have in your team and who has it, who kind of has it. And then you can decide, okay, do I hire for this or do I train for this?
Right. That's
right?
Really very practical. I like that.
It's so practical. And this is probably when you start investing in some training for your team, because you want, a lot of the times those early people, they're so dedicated and they really are the fiber of the organization. And there's so much history and knowledge there. You don't want to lose them. And it's kind of a testament to your company when you are a startup and you've had somebody there for the entire time, right? So figuring out ways to grow people too, I think, is really important.
I think that I like that, the practicality of that. I think even as you're describing that, what came to mind was, early on, it's like, hey, we're innovating to solve this problem. And maybe another way to frame is like, hey, we're innovating to like run this company. And that might be another way to kind of keep that same flavor in there, but also redirect it in this season of really setting up stability and sustainability in your growth. One more question in this space that came to mind as you're describing, do I train for this or do I hire for this, is, maybe you had that person who's on your team at the beginning and they it's like, hey, we need someone to make sure that there's enough money in the bank to make sure, like, when people do get paid, there's enough money to pay everyone. It's not like, oops, sorry, you were last in line, but then quickly they're like, it's like, well, that doesn't make them by default the CFO, because those are really different skill sets. But suddenly you're like, oh, there's 10 of us, and now there's like a few more financial functions. You were doing it before, so I guess you're the CFO now. You see that a lot where you get kind of these titles, and it's like, okay, I'm the chief of myself. But so we see kind of the funny side where maybe the titles get given a little too quickly. But in the case where you're like, yeah, that's not the right role for this person. They've made a huge contribution. We don't want to lose them, but we also don't want them to just kind of feel like, all right, cool, thanks, we're moving past you. So how do you, like you said, sometimes you have to hire for it and sometimes you have to train. And in that case, it might be more of a hire depending on how fast stuff escalates. How do you navigate that with the team members, especially when it's small? It's not just like they're one of 1,000. It's like they were number 4 and now there's still only 12 of us.
I know, and that's really tough. And honestly, that the finance function is such a prime example of that, right? So the way I think of it, like in culture and in the company, it's like you have your team, you have your culture of your team, right? And that's like its entity, but then you also have the business as an entity and what the business is going to need. And you want your culture and your people to be serving the entity. This is something bigger than them, and that's what's paying their paycheck. Mm-hmm. That's what's serving their customers, right? And so sometimes it's, frankly, you have to make the choice for the company, right? And sometimes you have to let go that person who's gotten you really, really far. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm saying when you have to make tough decisions like that, which you will, it's really not about the decision. It's all about the communication and how you handle it. Like if you tell somebody, hey, in 6 months from now, like your job isn't going to, like, I'm going to have to hire a CFO, and these are the gaps maybe in the company that you can fill, and this is what your new role is going to look like, and you're going to have a new manager. Or if the time comes, you're going to get a severance package. We're going to look after you. You have to be thoughtful with that, because sometimes 6 months, that's enough to check somebody out. But a lot of times when people are in those kind of roles, they actually do know that they can't be the next step, the natural next step, right? So yeah, I think
you might be relieved to say, hey, we have a spot for you here. Your superpowers are best serving the whole in this role. The top isn't actually always as good as it sounds.
Yes, exactly. Well, and that's where that talent and capability assessment will really surface, like, oh, hey, there's these gaps. And if you can go to them and say, these are the gaps that we have right now in our organization that need to be filled. We're open to training you on them, developing you. Definitely being willing to invest in people is a really, really good thing if they're going to have to make that sort of shift.
Yeah, I appreciate, you kind of walking through some of those different cases, because it's like, as the company grows and as we grow the culture, it is very practical. It's very personal. I appreciate, though, how you called out, it's like, it really is all about the communication. Like, the decision can go a number of ways, and in any of those, they can go good or bad, mostly based on the communication. So
100%.
I think you're totally, hitting it
and
there.
frankly, by now, there's a good chance you've had to make some sort of uncomfortable change on your team.
That's totally true. Yes. Yeah. If you haven't had that at this point, wow, congrats. DM us. We'd love to hear that story. Founding is not an easy journey. and as we've talked through all of these stages, we see that there's a lot of highs, there's good things, there's lows, there's monotonous things, but the culture does really frame how that works all together. And even as we were wrapping up with events, I thought it was interesting that, as you're talking about, like, how a lot of it rests on you as a founder, kind of navigating the unscripted. But a lot of that is formed way back in the first thing we talked about, in that existential stage, when you talked about it being a personal operating system and you can have a culture of one. Hey, if you take the time and you are intentional in forming that early, then you have it when you face the unexpected. And if you don't cultivate that and you don't strengthen it, then you don't have that foundation when you hit those unexpected changes. So I like how that actually kind of came full circle there. But as we kind of wrap up, though, Melissa, what would you want to say to a founder, just kind of as we think about the whole journey, as they're creating culture, as they're leading? Any exhortations, any encouragements or guidance you want to leave with our founding community here?
Oh, well, I think I said it in the beginning too. It's like, this is such a personal growth opportunity, right? And I think stepping into the fact that you're a leader early is a really good move. And this process of developing yourself is so important, because people want you to see you level up, and you're going to want it for yourself. So doing the things that you need to do in order for that to happen, take the time out when you need the time out. If you're somebody who doesn't need the time out, great. But if you are, show your team who you are and that you take little breaks. It's another thing. It's like understanding how much your team and your company wants to know about your personal life. Just because you're a founder doesn't mean they have to know all the nitty-gritty details, right? That's not everyone's style. And so, giving yourself the grace and permission that, these are the boundaries that I'm going to have and create. And if you don't have those, and that's the way you operate too, go for it. Just really being conscious, I think, of yourself can pay off so much at all stages. And so, if that's working with a coach early on, or bringing on a co-founder to, help your gaps, is that getting an HR or chief of staff or someone that you can lean on to. Definitely having people in your corner you can trust is so helpful. It can be lonely at the top, so try and as you're growing your crew and your company, you definitely want to create a little team that you can trust, and vice versa.
Well, I appreciate you, encouraging us and exhorting us, guiding us as we walk through all those stages. Just continue to hear the themes of knowing yourself, of that self-awareness, of intentionality and communication. And it just seems like, okay, if you're, as a founder, if you're listening to this, and whichever stage you're in, those are probably some of the levers you're going to pull. But I encourage, if you're just listening to one of the stages, go back and listen to the others, because they do all weave together really naturally. So, Melissa, thanks for sharing with the community. I love this interview. It's been a lot of fun. I think it will be a huge blessing to all of our founders. So thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.